Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished participants. My name is Rakhiemah. I am Junior Associate of the Energy Modeling and Policy Planning from the ASEAN Center for Energy, and I will be the Master of Ceremony for today's panel session. First of all, it is my pleasure to welcome you to this parallel session of the ASEAN Energy Business Forum 2025, Accelerating Renewable Energy Deployment Through Gender-Responsive Policy. Aligned with ASEAN's commitment towards clean energy transition and guided by the newly endorsed theme of the ASEAN Plan of Action on Energy Cooperation 2026 to 2030, the region will advance the theme of just and inclusive energy transition over the next 5 years. This means that beyond transforming our energy system, we also seek to strengthen the linkage with other sectors, which include gender, and to ensure that the benefits of this transition are shared equitably. Today's session will explore how we can develop effective pathways and frameworks for renewable energy that are not only gender-aware, but truly gender-responsive, ensuring that inclusion is reflected in both policy design and implementation. Without further ado, I would like to invite our moderator for this panel session, Ms. Aldilla Noor, Project Manager of the ASEAN Climate Change and Energy Project from the ASEAN Center for Energy. Ms. Aldilla, please come forward. So a bit of introduction, Aldilla Noor is leading the ASEAN Climate Change and Energy Project, or ACCEP, a flagship initiative supporting ASEAN's low-carbon and net-zero ambitions. In her role, she leads strategic research and regional cooperation efforts in advancing the energy-climate nexus around Southeast Asia. Aldilla is also a committed advocate for a just and inclusive energy transition with a particular focus on integrating gender equality into energy policy and planning. Her work bridges technical expertise and policy engagement, spanning areas such as energy transition governance, regional energy climate alignment, and emerging technologies. And so I will pass the mic to Ms. Aldilla, and distinguished participants, please enjoy the session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rhea, for the very kind introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Aldilla. It's truly a pleasure to be here and to moderate the session, Accelerating Renewable Energy Deployment Through Gender-Responsive Policy. So this session, I think Rhea already mentioned, we wanted to explore how Southeast Asia, how ASEAN can strengthen the integration of gender equality into energy policies, into financing frameworks, and also, of course, implementation strategies as well, ensuring that our clean energy transition not only fast, but also fair and inclusive. So we are very fortunate today to be joined by four very distinguished experts representing diverse perspective from international organizations, development institutions, civil society, and also gender advocates, each bringing valuable insights on how we can put inclusivity at the heart of the energy transition. Now let me introduce our panel one by one. Let's give a big welcome to Ms. Ayu Abdullah, the Executive Director of Energy Action Partners. She is Energy Action Partners is an international non-profit organization focused on inclusive energy planning and community-driven electrification. And she's also currently a Vice President of RA's board with over 15 years of experience across Southeast Asia, East Africa, and the Pacific. Her work spans renewable energy policy and rural mini-grid development. Welcome, Ayu. Please sit down. And then next, please welcome Ms. Jacqueline Lam, the Regional Director at Sustainable Energy for All. Over the past 17 years, Jacqueline has worked with Boeing, the ASEAN Development Bank, C40 Cities, as well as Singapore's Energy Market Authority. And she has extensive experience in policy support for multi-sectoral decarbonization and has led efforts to advance the energy transition in the aviation sector across Southeast Asia. Welcome, Jacqueline. Let me just quickly check my notes. And then our third panelist is Ms. Nachatira Turaichami, the Senior Project Coordinator of Climate Action Network Southeast Asia, CANSIA. She began her career as a climate youth advocate and delegate representing her alma mater, Cardiff University, at the UNFCCC COP22 in Marrakesh. She coordinates project activities undertaken by CANSIA and its partners through planning, monitoring, and reporting to ensure that activities achieve their targeted outcomes toward inclusive and gender-responsive just energy transition in the region. Welcome, Nacha. And finally, please welcome Mr. Yusuf Uwa Mahoro, Lead Energy Specialist in the Energy and Extractive Global Practice for the East Asia and Pacific region at the World Bank. Yusuf has extensive experience leading complex reforms and regional power integration initiatives, particularly in Africa, including power sector restructuring, renewable energy development, and private capital mobilization. Before joining World Bank, he also served as Commissioner and Director General of Energy in Rwanda's Ministry of Infrastructure and also Rwanda Energy, Water and Sanitation Authority. Welcome, Yusuf. Please give a big round of applause for all of our 4 experts here. So maybe just to give a little bit of background on our discussions today. In the next 1 hour, our discussion will unfold in 2 main segments. So first, we're going to discuss regarding policy pathways and, of course, how we can integrate institutional frameworks like for gender-responsive energy policy. And then second, we're going to unlock financing and capacity building for inclusive renewable energy deployment. Now, to start our segment, let me begin with one question for all of the speakers here. So across ASEAN, we've seen rapid progress in renewable energy deployment, but inclusion often lags behind. And in your view, what does a gender-responsive renewable energy policy look like in practice, and why is it critical for accelerating the region's energy transition? Maybe if we can start with Ayu.
Thanks so much for having me here today. So my name is Ayu, and I'm co-founder and executive director for an organization called Energy Action Partners. We work in the space of energy access, so that's really community-centered energy using decentralized systems, so mini-grids, solar home systems, and the like. And we operate across Southeast Asia, South Asia, East Africa. But I also happen to be the vice president of the board of the Global Alliance for Rural Electrification. I think in terms of ASEAN, I think the question was, sorry. Yeah, gender responsive renewable energy. I wanted to kind of maybe step back a little and think about how we could frame some of the discussion. I think that we're not really going to get to a just energy transition on mechanisms and instruments alone. I think the main reason is because, there's a lot more to the problem than just hit counts and increasing numbers and targets and goals. And I think we have to actually recognize that what needs to really happen is a shift in the entire system, because right now the system is built around historical dominant values, and it may not really be fit for women to actually enter, right? So I think I kind of wanted to maybe talk a little bit about that throughout my answers. But really, yeah, I think we need to be thinking about how to really shift agency, ownership of decisions in the energy space, in the renewable energy space, and not necessarily just be talking about numbers. We're not, women and gender is not a pipeline that needs to be fixed. Really, we need to kind of recreate the system. We need to also move away from trying to create mechanisms and instruments so that we could fit women into the system. We need to be shifting that system around, and we need to be redefining things like risk, value, and recognize that bankability is not just about scale, speed. We need to also include other values that we currently see as valuable, right, when we're talking about gender as well. And I think more importantly, we need to be redesigning the enabling conditions for women, and then only look at the mechanisms within those enabling conditions. So, things like when we talk about community energy systems, safety should be extremely important and part of budgets. Inclusion and milestones need to be integrated into contracts and agreements. And so we need these real pledges and commitments to actually implement these types of things. And I think also intersectionality matters. Women aren't homogenous, and we haven't been discussing enough about the intersections of gender and a lot of other issues when we want to approach this topic of gender responsiveness. So, we need to be recognizing all the different ranges of needs of women, rural, urban, high income, low income, and all of this. And sometimes we might need to also be looking at hyper-localized understanding that should inform national and regional policy. Otherwise, we kind of risk, continuing to force women into roles that may or may not fit them. So I think that's what I think about gender responsiveness and accelerating it in our region. But I think that this is kind of a no-brainer, because I think that if we were to really try and improve all these things, the deployment of renewable energy will become better and will perform better. So it's really just my kind of pitch for today.
Thank you so much, Ayu, for very insightful. I think it truly is. We cannot just, because a lot of the time we only talking about how to increase the number, right? But then you mentioned it's more about numbers. It's also how to shift the system itself to make it like so women can also fit in there, not just we just push it into the system that is already now happening. Okay, thank you. We'll have so much to talk about, I think, later on, especially on your experiences. And now we're going to Jacqueline. I'm going to pose the same question. What does a gender-responsive renewable energy policy look like in your perspective, and why does it matter for the energy transition?
Thank you very much. So just really quickly to provide a bit of an overview, Sustainable Energy for All, our mandate as a United Nations Office of Project Services program is to really deliver on Sustainable Development Goal number 7, which is clean, affordable, universal access for energy. So to your point, the why we need a gender inclusive policy approach. I think this is really related to how we frame, as Ayu mentioned earlier, how we frame the clean energy transition. And from the United Nations perspective, we really frame it through a people-centered lens, and how do we deploy. I mean, and the truth is that metrics are important, because without the metrics, we won't be able to measure progress. But to put in place then metrics that are people-centered, and so therefore for the measurement of progress on Sustainable Development Goals number 7, we look at not just the access component, but we also look at the degree of which the clean cooking delivery and deployment is being achieved, alongside energy efficiency, some of the other metrics that also impact energy consumption and energy demand across the board. So bearing in mind, of course, also that Sustainable Development Goal number 7, SDG 7, is also an enabler for SDG 13 on climate action. So when we look at energy as an enabler that supports also building of climate resilience, we're also looking at how clean energy deployment supports women across the spectrum of whether they are living in urban centers, whether they're living on remote island archipelagos, what access means for them in terms of ensuring climate resilience, what access means for them in terms of also the intersectionality of healthcare, enabling education for younger women as well. So the framing of people-centered energy transition, I think, is going to be really crucial. And we are really strong advocates in terms of mainstreaming the inclusivity as well as mainstreaming this gender approach into the metrics that are universally adopted, such as the SDG metrics. And this is going to be really important in accelerating deployment across the board and enabling us to measure progress in a way that also ensures inclusivity for women across different social strata, different geographical locations, and different economic circumstances as well. So I think this is where the framing of it is going to be really crucial as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacqueline, for a very excellent point. I think framing itself is it's truly important. And that's why in the region right now, our energy blueprint, the regional energy cooperation blueprint that we call the APAEC, the ASEAN Plan of Action for Energy Cooperation, that we actually just endorsed today at the ASEAN Energy Ministers meeting that just happened today. For the next cycle, 2026 to 2030, for the first time, just an inclusive energy transition is actually in the center of the theme of the next year, ASEAN energy cooperation. So I think we see that if the ASEAN member states also see how framing is very important, that we included this in our theme. And it's really great that you mentioned the interlinkage between SDG 13 and SDG 7, how SDG 13 can help us to achieve our target as well in SDG 7, because we actually also have discussion on that tomorrow on another panel. I'll invite everyone to come tomorrow at 10 a.m. Also, tomorrow we'll discuss more on the interlinkage between SDG 7 and SDG 13, just to put it there to promote also. Okay. Next, we have Nacha in here, coming from the CSO perspective, I believe. So, Nacha, what is gender-responsive energy policy looks like to you, and why is it important for energy transition?
Thank you, Aldilla, for having me here. And I think my esteemed colleagues have set the stage very well, and I like how they included a heavy emphasis on the intersectionality approach and the need to displace and the need to transition in an equitable way that is centered on justice, because if we don't do that, then we're merely displacing the issues from the fossil fuel energy systems to the renewable energy, and we're not going to get anywhere. So I want to just maybe go back a step further and introduce Climate Action Network Southeast Asia, which is one of the largest climate movements. We are the regional Southeast Asian node with about 38 members from 8 countries around the region, and we focus on climate action, trying to link work that happens on the ground on various issues, just energy transition being one of them, to more global conversations such as COP30. I will say this: if we want the energy transition to go, faster in Southeast Asia, we have to design it around how people actually live and work, especially the women who hold together households, micro businesses, and community services. A gender-responsive renewable energy policy starts there. It treats women's groups and community health workers as delivery partners, not as an afterthought. For example, in Indonesia's coal belt, a significant number of people, about 77% in a survey, was found to have very limited understanding about climate change or renewable energy, but about 95.3% expressed readiness to adopt renewable energy systems if there were policy pathways. This shows that there is an appetite, but it requires a lot of engagement. It requires a lot of stakeholder engagement and dealing with them as equal partners. I want to also talk about how a gender-responsive policy refuses to measure just in terms of gigawatts, megawatts. It measures success. It sets targets and budgets for what family values. Time saved from unpaired care and domestic work, women placed into technical and managerial roles, women-owned energy enterprises, finance grievance cases resolved. ASEAN-level guidance now calls for exactly this kind of measurement discipline, right? To put gender and social inclusion requirements into energy plans, procurement, monitoring, and to publish sex disaggregated indicators, which are key. So yes, metrics are important, but are we measuring the right metrics in order to understand the intersectional issues on the ground? So, I'm going to go beyond ownership and access because that has been adequately covered by my colleagues. But I want to talk about two case studies. One was in Laos, where the Nam Thiounn 2 hydropower plant, with a capacity of about 1,070 megawatt, this project exemplifies the importance of gender-responsive assessment for effective project development. And I'll tell you why. A comprehensive gender analysis was undertaken, identifying women and girls from ethnic and vulnerable households who were provided special support during the relocation. The Lao Women Union and gender specialists collaborated to implement a gender-responsive social development plan and a relocation action plan, ensuring adequate compensation. And these gender actions had legal backing, with land titles notably extended to married couples as co-owners and compensation payments made jointly to couples. And then, of course, you have alternative livelihoods that were created, including traditional activities with women, embarking on chicken rearing and handicrafts. Now, I want to go and shift gears to what happened in Malaysia. And Ayu would be very familiar with this. I'm talking about the construction of the Bakun Dam in Borneo in East Malaysia. It resulted in a large-scale displacement and loss of livelihood for the surrounding indigenous and local communities. The dam was constructed in a biodiversity hotspot, undermining the area's ecological resilience and commodifying land that held ancestral and social significance for its inhabitants. Compensation was often inadequate, ineffectively deployed, and took much too long to distribute. The communities that had to resettle became dependent on capitalist structures, such as currency and market systems of exchange, such as for food, whereas previously they would procure freely from the forest and dam area. And all of this was particularly challenging for women who could not access remunerative work in resettlement areas. Rural women were also severed from their access to food crop cultivation for their family sustenance, or from the foraging activities that provided them with supplementary income. This case study demonstrates that a feminist or a gendered just energy transition must uphold a rights-based approach in which the people whose lives will be impacted by energy development projects must play a central role in decision-making. And a lot of times you have ambitious policies nationally amongst the ASEAN member states, which are fantastic, right? The APAIC including a very specific terminology on just and inclusive energy transition is great. But what's happening on the ground? Are we putting people first? Are we treating them with the dignity and the rights that they deserve? And I think first and foremost, a gender transformative renewable energy policy in practice would practice this. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Nacha, for sharing these case study that very important. I think it really depict the why then we need gender responsive energy policy, right? Why we need to put just there in the just and inclusive in energy transition. We see how from your case study that how it's really important on doing that. And you mentioned about finance as well in there, and this is a very good shift to Yusuf. Here from the international financing institution perspective. I think I'll pose the same question to you. What is gender responsive energy policy look like? And then why do you think it's important for accelerating the region's energy transition?
Thank you so much. First of all, thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me in this panel. It's a really gender-sensitive panel. I'm not an. I should first start. I'm not. I'm a simple engineer. I'm not an expert in gender. I'm an engineer who happened to be at the World Bank. As you know, the World Bank provides financing, be it for implementation of projects, be it budget support, or be it any guarantees that we provide to bring in private capital. So all our operations should be gender informed. They should screen and make sure that they are all, they take into account gender equality. But from my own experience, a truly gender responsive renewable energy policy is a policy that doesn't treat gender as as a kind of an afterthought. It's just something that's a policy that would, take gender as a core part of how we design and deliver energy transition. So in practical terms, it would mean three things in my view. One is understanding data. We need to know how men and women stand in the energy sector, whether in access to clean energy, whether in creating jobs or decision making. Without evidence, we would be flying blind, So second, it's about creating opportunities for women to participate and lead, From supporting entrepreneurs, be it in solar energy, be it in wind, and really making sure that women get appropriate training and finance to reach, to be really involved, be it in cities or in the rural area. So this has to be inclusive. Number three is about building accountability, including gender indicators in our project design or policies, so that we can really be able to track and monitor how we are getting there and get a reward for that. So at the World Bank, we have realized actually that when women are engaged in the projects, it can be as engineers or community leaders or innovators. So those projects are not only inclusive, but they are also most successful. One last thing I want to bring in, we look at numbers, look at the number of women. It's about half, of the pool. So we cannot leave them behind and think that we will be successful in terms of clean energy transition. So we need really to bring that critical mass of, half of the pool, of half of the population. We should really bring them if we want to be successful in our energy transition agenda. Over.
Thank you so much, Yusuf, for sharing your perspective. I think as the only male panelist in here, I do think it's very important for us to talk about this. Usually we talk about gender mainstreaming, the importance of women's role in the energy sector, but then we only talk about among female. I do think that we also need to include male panelists also in the discussion to make sure that we have the same language in here. So I do appreciate you as well to join in this discussion with us. And so I think we've heard from all of our panelists in here what is gender responsive renewable energy policy, in what they think about it, and then why it's important. All right. So now let's dig in a little bit and go to the discussion, the first discussion that we'll talk about regarding policy pathways and also institutional frameworks. I'll pose the question to Jacqueline here. With Sustainable Energy for All, you work closely, especially I think SEforALL works is actually aligned with ASEAN ambition to integrate GIET principles, right? I already mentioned how our regional energy blueprint, APAEC, is already included GIET in our long-term energy planning. So from your global experience, I would say, what's institutional mechanism that have successfully linked energy policy with social inclusion and also gender equality outcomes.
Hi. Okay. Thank you very much for that. And again, congratulations on the updated APAIC and placing that front and center with the just and inclusive energy transition priorities. I want to bring our attention to some of the institutional frameworks that we've been looking at. So earlier I mentioned sort of the SDG 7 framing around just and inclusive people-centered energy transition. One of the ways that we really look at mainstreaming, and Yusuf mentioned this earlier as well, mainstreaming gender into energy transition policy. I think what is really crucial is to approach it from two fronts. The data, the measurement, having the gender disaggregated data is really key in order to also identify really where the vulnerabilities are. So we see in again, coming back to energy as an enabler, we see in a lot of the clean cooking, clean cooling deployment solutions where there is going to be a actually disproportionately larger impact on supporting women's health, women's access to economic activity, freeing up, women from having to, for example, collect biomass for their daily cooking needs, and the transition to electric cooking and the economic freedom that it accords to women. And so some of these data points and some of these examples that we've noted have been a part of, for example, SEforALL's energy transition and investment plans, really looking through where some of these electrification needs are, not just at the industry level, but in the household level, looking at also, for example, where clean cooling solutions unlock not just the thermal comfort of women who are predominantly homemakers and undertaking economic activity in the home setting, but also looking at sustainable cooling from an agricultural sector where we are then preventing food spoilage by ensuring, resilience in providing sustainable cooling solutions in the agricultural sector, in the fishery sectors as well. So some of these institutional approaches through holistic energy transition planning and really looking at end use solutions for renewable energy planning. And so that being said, from the APAIC implementation perspective, we're very excited to be supporting ACE as well as ASEAN's member states in the future implementation of APAIC, taking a very people-centered approach with the just and inclusive energy transition as the central theme, and then also building in the skills development approach. So earlier I looked at the measurement and some of the end users that are being deployed in order to support a just and inclusive energy transition. The skills development is going to be really also key, and Naja mentioned it briefly earlier in terms of how do we then unlock the participation of women of different age groups, of different socio-economic backgrounds by and renewable energy is really quite a leveling sector where compared to the fossil fuel industry where there was only about over 20% female participation, with the renewable energy sector, we're already seeing about over 30% female participation in the renewable energy workforce. And this can continue to increase because the skill sets that are needed for participation in the renewable energy workforce are going to be, a lot more gender neutral to a large extent. And so the SEforALL youth and female youth STEM engineer training program is one of the ways that we are incorporating at the community level the skill sets that are needed to deploy for example, solar assembly and maintenance and operations of off-grid solar and battery storage solutions, and really fully integrating female youth engineers into the training programs with them as a key sort of target sector, target group for these STEM training programs as well. So just two levels of, ensuring access and ensuring opportunities that enable women to also be empowered to both deploy and support sustained clean energy access. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacqueline, for sharing your initiative at SEforALL. And I think it's very important to not only look at the policy. I think it's also important to look at the ground itself. It's important. Access is very important. How can we enhance this access? How can we enhance the youth and also women, especially to actually capable to access this financial access and also capacity building and training and all that you just mentioned previously. And that really sets the discussion actually to our next question. If I may pose the question to Ayu in here, talking about access that Jacqueline mentioned. I think access to finance is one of the major challenge for women-led clean energy enterprises, like clean energy startups. So based on your experience, you also the board members of Alliance for Rural Electrification. What is it that you see in the ground? What kind of partnership or financing models that are you see in the ground that able to close this gap? Perhaps if you want to have a quick drink.
Sorry about that. Thank you. Sorry, recovering from something. I think along the same lines of what I'm thinking of in terms of we need to also be looking at the conditions. And I loved how, Jacqueline, you're talking about all these targets, and Nacha, you mentioned it as well, where the data is not just at macro level, like we're breaking it down to micro level to really understand what's happening on the ground. And I think measuring all those things are really like a great step to measuring progress and trying to understand the key problems. I think from the work that I do, and then also, the organizations that I come into contact with, going one step further, we would also be looking at the conditions through which may prevent or are barriers for women to access mechanisms like finance and things like that as well. And I think as we measure targets and numbers, we also want to be understanding really like what are the core issues. And I think it was mentioned just now in terms of like training and also wanting women, more women technicians and engineers and things like that. Some of our work actually is to really break down to the level of the task itself within, say, like solar deployment. What are some gender issues that are creating barriers for women? And it can be as simple as in a certain culture, women don't wear pants and they can't climb ladders, right? And so breaking it down, and I mentioned like this kind of like hyper-localized context, right, would support a lot of the data and the information and the numbers that then get fed back up to policy. So in the same thread, I think when we talk about access to financing, it's really about, first of all, understanding the conditions through which women have trouble accessing the financing. And to us, it really is sort of fixing those conditions, but then also looking at, of course, what kind of financing is fit for purpose and would suit women in that specific context, right? And so definitely, I think we want to be looking at financing that also the value boundaries are expanded to also be thinking of decision making. And when we talk about numbers, like, how many women are involved in the decision making, are they also present at the table? Because sometimes you can have organizations with, say, 50% women at top leadership, but then quorum is not really required for them to be there. So we also want to be making sure that that agency is being practiced as well. So these financial mechanisms need to include, like a reframing of the values, right? And shifting like who kind of has a say and who's in the room as they're creating those values. So we need to be listening to the women and understanding the main challenges. I know that's very difficult and challenging to do at different levels, especially when we're really trying to like push for certain policies. But I think it's actually really important. And so like I can talk about like certain financial mechanisms, like like smaller ticket amounts, like lower barrier to entry, guarantees that need to come from institutions that can support women and all of that. But I also think that it's equally important to be talking about how bankability is defined in the first place, and then having women be part of the process and closing that loop into designing those mechanisms.
Thank you, Ayu. We can definitely touch upon that as we discuss on this panel. And thank you for bringing up to understand what actually happened in the ground is really, really important. And then how we can fit into the policy, to the financing mechanism to actually help the situation in the ground. I think that's very meaningful. So now going maybe further into that, from Nacha's perspective, if you can share with us again, you already mentioned about what is actually the key barriers that remains in the ground in terms of energy access, in terms of financing access, and perhaps. Nacha, you can also share about Kensia perspective on this. Are there any barriers that preventing women and also marginalized group from accessing financing and capacity building opportunities?
So thank you for the question, but before I respond to that, I want to very quickly also sort of segue into what Ayu mentioned, her observation about some seemingly very simple cultural barriers that prevent women from engaging. Putting aside the fact that a significant number of women in Asia, meaning the time that a woman spends in unpaid care work is equivalent to over 4 men, right? And that this is in Asia. So we're not talking about the work that they do, but then there's also the huge cultural barrier that prevents women from engaging meaningfully in energy production, in having a say in things that have very real impacts in them, with women being a significant, like forming a large group of energy consumers, right? And this is something that I also observed when I was at the Indonesia Climate Week last year, and there was this gender action learning toolkit on sustainability that our project partner, Yayasan Humanis, held a workshop on. And it's a very simple thing, which is just this. They use diagrams to sort of map out the gender dynamics that exist in families and how that is impacting them in real life, economically, fiscally, and in a lot of other ways. And it was very interesting to see the conversations that came out of that surfaced in the workshop, and that included the need to preserve traditional values, which of course speaks to the woman's role and position in it, oftentimes inhibiting her from meaningfully, engaging in these larger conversations about energy and all that. So I just wanted to respond to that when we talk about gender responsive renewable energy policies or gender transformative approaches, sometimes there's this cultural barrier which varies from place to place, right, across ASEAN member states, and that is something that we must pay attention to, but there isn't language for that yet in any of the policies. But yeah, so to respond to your question, right, I want to go back to the statistic that I provided earlier, which was a research study essentially on strengthening women's capacity building in East Kalimantan and Sumatra, which is the coal belt, right, in Indonesia by our project partner. And this low awareness but high readiness, willingness to participate in the renewable energy industry, it reveals something that is quite significant. You cannot apply for financing you do not know exists. You cannot attend training you cannot reach because it clashes with either childcare, market hours, or safety concerns. And when women do try to access capital, the system often expects paperwork they cannot produce, collateral in one's own name, business histories for informal enterprises, and vendor pre-qualification designed for bigger firms. Community-scale projects are then labeled not bankable. And by community, I also include women, right? And public climate finance that does arrive, flows mainly to large infrastructure, such as loans, deepening debt and leaving little fiscal room for grant-based services that inclusivity requires. Training suffers from the same design problem. Generic tech workshops rarely include stipends, childcare, safe transport, or flexible timing, and they're not paired with paid placements, operation and maintenance contracts, or enterprise links. I understand that you do things differently, and that is very commendable. But this is the reality on the ground that we're seeing in Indonesia, in the Philippines. So new skills do not necessarily translate into new income. So we need to think about the consequences of these things: time poverty, gaps in marketing and equipment, risky dependence on, CSR projects, for example. When we talk about capacity building projects that are a lot of times tied to CSR projects, then how far does it go along? Does it have a long-term vision, long-term support, resources that's provided to ensure that whatever social enterprises or whatever that is being undertaken on the ground, what happens 6 months from now? What happens 1 year from now? What happens to these projects? And also we keep steering by the wrong dashboards. Ministries and utilities still report on the kilowatt hours. I've brought this up, and installed capacity, we've all brought it up, but not necessarily who benefited and who were left out. And this is also something that you very well raised about sex disaggregated data. We also need social indicators, women's contributions and constraints that remain invisible as long as we don't measure these things. And so then budgets don't shift as a consequence. What is interesting is that my statistic revealed there's only 8% of women who are employed in conventional energy industries across ASEAN, but it seems there's 30% in renewable energy in the region. Globally, I see. So within the region, that the number is much lower, and that's something that we probably need to take a closer look at when we look at data. So if we want financing and capacity building to reach women and marginalized groups, the fix is not so much higher level alone, but it also needs to focus on very localized issues that women face in these communities. And put the money in windows that women groups can actually access. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nacha, for sharing that experiences that you actually see on the ground, what actually happened. And I think we can see that both you and IU sharing the same thing, that we need to know exactly what happened in the ground, how to localize this, and then how to ensure that women can actually access those financial that is available for them. Now, with that, I would like to ask Yusuf then. I think it will be a quite difficult take from the discussion that we have, but just wanted to know from World Bank experience, how are there any lessons from World Bank experience that show how gender-responsive budgeting and also financial frameworks can open opportunities for women in renewable energy.
Thank you so much. Let me share something. As ASEAN move toward a more comprehensive monitoring system, I think it is important to link financial flows to not only to install the capacity, like how many megawatts will come as an output, but also to some measurable social outcomes such as inclusivity, jobs, and community benefits. So I think that will be important. So from the World Bank perspective, we see three main areas of development where we can actually, as partners, development partner, we can add value. First is supporting countries to strengthen their data and monitoring frameworks. This is, helping ministries, electricity utilities, rural electrification agencies, really to integrate gender, employment, and the community indicators into their renewable energy tracking systems, alongside technical and other financial indicators that we measure. Let me give an example of what we're trying to do at the World Bank. We have an operation that is supporting ACE. That is actually, we call it Technical Assistance Program. And in that we have a small component. Actually, it's not small. It's a major component. Shinya is here, can actually testify. We are supporting to put in place such kind of monitoring framework that's actually will integrate gender. As AC has already a program to come up with regional ASEAN database, and that we are trying to support to include gender and inclusion indicators into that. So that will be very important, really, to be able to monitor later on how our programs are actually making progress in terms of gender outcomes. That's number one, in terms of supporting data and monitoring framework. Number two, capacity building and knowledge sharing will be important from multilateral financing banks like World Bank. Drawing on experience to help states develop tools and methodologies so that they can measure social impact in a consistent ways. Let me give an example. So there is an operation we have. We call it SEforALL in Indonesia. It's a program for we pay for results that are achieved. As I mentioned, we have many instruments, but this one is specific because we agree on areas of results, and when we see results, we disperse. So a part of that program, we actually work with the electricity utility, PLN, to really institutionalize gender responsive human resource reforms and the data dashboard where we track women recruitment, how are women retained, and promotions in technical roles. So that I think is a good example. We could replicate those in other countries. Now, third is really linking finance to impact. For example, through such a result-based finance or blend instrument that's incentivize measurable gender and employment outcomes as part of project performance. At the World Bank, we are sort of embedding this approach in our program, really to make sure that we ensure that for each and every dollar we mobilize, we make sure that it delivers inclusive, sustainable growth. I wanted to give another example that also shows how we measure how our operations actually reach gender targets. Again, for this Indonesia energy program, result-based program, we finance directly. We have we have special budget to make sure that we get measurable numbers in terms of how many women are really trained. We have this we have a target of training 80,000 staff of PLN. But we try to make sure that at least 23% of those trainees from PLN would be women. And so in terms of technical leadership, in terms of, both in leadership, but also in technical aspects. As you know, there are few women engineers, technicians in the energy sector. So when we do that training and we target the numbers, that encourages actually women participation. So I think those are the other measures that we have. I give an example: when we do electrification project, we make sure that we track how many female-headed households that are achieved. So such kind of frameworks, monitoring framework, really ensures that we track how our financing is really getting results in terms of number of women given the capacity and so on. So let me stop here.
Thank you so much, Yusuf, for sharing all of these World Bank initiative, especially in how we can mainstream gender in energy policy. And yes, definitely, we have a project together with ACE, World Bank and ACE. And actually, this year in July, we had the first ever ASEAN Energy Gender Forum that happened in the region. I think this is actually the first time. Jacqueline was also there, I believe. This was the first time we convened such a big forum to talk about gender, focusing on that, only just one day talking about that in the energy sector, with the World Bank support, of course. And we've seen, because we managed to invite not only people from the energy sectors, but also people from transport was there, and then people from climate was there, and people from women's also there, that they share what are the initiative actually that they have, and then how we can actually integrate it to energy sector. And it creates awareness. I think that's very important, because we've seen from the ground, from what Ayu and Nacha mentioned, and Jacqueline also mentioned, how it's very important to understand what happened in the ground. And I think we see a lot of, when we talk about policy, then it will be like very high level, right? So then how can we transfer this story to the policymakers, so then they can understand what actually happened in the ground, and then how can we include this into the policy planning. And I think that's very important. And talking about awareness, we also will have, starting next year, we will also have an award actually for women in the energy sector. And I think it will be later on to be announced in the gala dinner in ABF. So yeah, I'm very pleased with a lot of initiative that we has achieved so far. And on that note, I think it's time for audience question. So I'll invite people from the audience. If you have any questions, comments, or feedback, please feel free to ask. We have four experts in here ready to answer all of your questions. Yes, please, Kifari. Maybe if you can introduce your name and then also your institution. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Gifari. Firstly, sorry if my question sounds a bit simple. I come from energy system modeling background. So I usually looks at number, or as IU has put, just try to increase the number about megawatt and economic output. But after following this discussion, I realized that our development should be more than that. We should also include inclusivity. So my question is that you mentioned that we need to reshape the system so it fits for everyone, especially women. Could you share what that reshaping looks like in practice in ASEAN context? And what do you think needs to change from the current system and for the better future? And for Nacha, you mentioned that some family culture in Asia hold back or inhibit women participation in energy, even though that women is also a big part of energy user. Could you give more example what that looks like in more grounded sense? And how do you think we can change that for a better future? Thank you.
Thank you, Gifari, for the question. The first question, who would like? For Ayu.
So first of all, I'm from an engineering background, so I feel you. So I mean, we're trained to think in terms of numbers and formulas and data collection, right? And not really looking at like the people behind the numbers and the data. And I think one thing that I'm hoping would land as someone coming from like a technical background is conceptually what we try to do when we're designing a project or a system on the ground is we expand the system boundaries to also include non-technical aspects and requirements. So I think when you think of like engineering systems architecture, you have a boundary, right? And then you're always thinking of like, okay, what are inputs, process, outputs, right? So form, function, and your outputs, right? So in engineering terms, it's expanding that boundary to include social, financial, and then if you break those down, then you start to see there are very different requirements, right? So basically, like I encourage you to think about participatory design, to think about social sciences and anthropology, and to look at other spaces to integrate into your engineering design. What that looks like in practice is, I'm just going to give an example of, there's a community that we work with in Pahang, and that is about 4 hours from here, north, near to the Cameron Highlands, and there's pockets of communities unelectrified. Actually, West Malaysia has more than 200 communities unelectrified that don't show up in our census data, which is why Malaysia shows up as 100% electrified. But actually, that's not true. I mean, we still have pockets of unelectrified communities. So we have an indigenous community that we work with, and we were trying to design, start to finish project, but also expanded boundaries. So this means, how do you manage the system? How do you also achieve? And for us, success factor is not necessarily in terms of 10 years later, is the system still running? But it's 10 years later, has the community achieved the development goals as defined and articulated by them? So first of all, we do a lot of social mapping exercises, ethnographic methods to first of all get a good context and picture of what communities foresee and anticipate that they want out of the electricity system. So that looks like, increased education, productive use, and all of these different things. At the very core, it looks like being able to continue their lifestyles, their rural lifestyles, with additional services and amenities, right? They want to be able to access the internet, charge their phones, watch TV, access financial services, health, but still live in rural areas and using their traditional institutions and lifestyles. I think this is actually very important for us to recognize that sort of the urban lifestyle is not the dominant lifestyle for everyone, right? So what we did was we ran focus group discussions. We ran all female focus group discussions to really try and understand what is their potential energy consumption, what are their needs and aspirations as well. And they looked very different from workshops where it was co-ed, male, female. Women had a lot more cooking appliances. They had a lot more appliances that would reduce burden on them, washing machine, those types of things. So already those load profiles for the energy system starts to look very different, right? And then we asked them, okay, what what kind of involvement do you want in these energy systems? And sort of the traditional or conventional thing is, and as these are usually grant funded, we are required as an organization to report on how many females are there in the village energy committee, right? But actually we resist because we don't want to enforce our ideas of gender on the community as well. So we call ourselves gender sensitive. We turn to gender transformative if the community articulates that they see a need for intervention. If they do not articulate that, we remain gender sensitive, right? So then we ask them, how do you want to participate in the energy system? And the women said, we actually don't. We don't want to be on the technical committee. We don't want to be technicians, but we want to build businesses using the electricity system. And this becomes economic leadership, right? So now it's interesting because leadership is different from what we thought it was going to be. We thought leadership meant, okay, seat at the table in the village energy committee, right? You get to say how much people are going to pay for tariffs and all of that. And they're like, no, we just want to build our productive use. So then we ran more workshops. We continue to engage continually to understand what that means. And it was very interesting when we ran a productive use workshop in terms of what are potential enterprises in the community. And we saw a very consistent trend, which was the businesses that the men wanted to have only ran in the daytime. They were looking at, we want to have a motorcycle fixing workshop, stop at 6 p.m. But the women wanted to have a sundry shop, like a small shop, runs all the way up until 10 p.m. They want to do baking or cook like kueh, right? And then they wanted to get together at night to do it. So we saw that the loads that were coming from the women-led businesses were nighttime loads as well as daytime loads. So then we saw that changes the load profile of the community and the cash flow as well. And it created new spaces for the women to gather and do things collectively. So it's like opening up new communities, like sub-communities within the community. It was super interesting. And we've supported this path, right? And to us, I think what that means is in terms of creating leadership, we created multiple pathways to leadership that doesn't just look one way, and paid attention to gender sensitivities in the community. However, our team is female heavy, including our technical personnel. So then you started to see the younger women in the community see that there were technical people who are women. So we've seen also an increased interest, and maybe I do want to get training in the technical side. I'm not sure if I want to be part of the Village Energy Committee yet, but I want to attend the training, and we encourage this as well. For us, it's another way to expose them to what could be, right? So this is kind of what it looks like in practice. It's a lot of engagement, it's a lot of listening, it's a lot of unlearning what you think is going to happen and creating more pathways towards a shift in that system that I think we all need.
Thank you. I just wanted to add a point on the unlearning that you mentioned. Also, when we define energy access, traditionally and for a very long time, we've been looking at energy access as 4 to 6 hours, 2 light bulbs, maybe a phone charger. And that is fundamentally not what supports meaningful economic activity, especially at the household level, where a lot of women could potentially be actually... I will say this first off, so many of us are really productive at home, even juggling the professional work, the home chores, the, caretaker roles and responsibilities. So having that ability, expanding the definition of access alone, and what are the economic activity, additional economic activities that are then able to be, and of course World Bank colleagues have the multi-tier framework, which then, have a much more nuanced definition of what access looks like. And then tier 3 and above really unlocks a significant number of economic activities that then make it much more meaningful when we start to define access at that minimum level for wider participation, both at the professional level, but also more importantly, enabling these economic activities at the residential home use level as well. Thank you. And I think the next question.
Thank you. Can I get your name? Where are you from? Which part of Indonesia?
Jakarta.
Okay. So, whilst there are cases and most likely anecdotal evidence data in the Philippines where a partner is, unfortunately, I don't have access to that right now. But with regards to the GALS toolkit that was implemented by our project partner in the Sumba region, the Sumba Island. So when I visited Jakarta, they invited somebody, one of the alumni from the GALS workshop, and she said this: oftentimes women who are mostly relegated to unpaid care work, they don't have access to decision-making committees when they are having discussions on, for example, coal phase out, or what's going to happen to their livelihoods when they're looking at the next step and what that involves. They're completely removed from that conversation. And I understand that it's different in different regions, and sometimes they don't necessarily even want that. For them, it looks, participation in it looks different. But what they found was that from the implementation of the workshop and having these discourses and conversations between men and women, right, they found that the women were able to reclaim more power, more empowerment, and actually participate in these conversations. So previously, when you have those local village committee hearings and so on, they were removed from it. And after continuous discourse, they were provided access to it, and which some of them very zealously participated in, even taking on leadership positions. The data in terms of how many percentage resulted in what economic empowerment and so on, you can find more information in their report by Yayasan Hivos. Yeah. So the reason I asked where you're from is because I would encourage people, all genders of course, but especially men, to perhaps look at their surrounding and perhaps ask questions critically on the position that they enjoy, the privilege they have, as well as the position, the roles that women play around them in their day-to-day lives. This becomes more prominent, and you would certainly have access to a lot more stories in Indonesia compared to me. So I'd encourage you to do so. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nacha, for the answer. And I believe we are very short in time. It's already 7, and I think one of our panelists also need to go to the next to the next session. And so, if I may wrap up this panel with perhaps if each of the panel can share just one closing statement, just maybe 30 seconds to 1 minute, if you may. Can we start with Yusuf, perhaps?
Thank you so much. Second. I wanted to conclude with kind of showing actually how we should collaborate, achieving a just and inclusive energy transition is not something that any single actor can deliver alone. So I just wanted to indicate that there should be collaboration across governments, development partners, civil society, and even the private sector. Each would always bring unique strengths to, to turn principles into measurable results. First, I think government has an important role to play as really setting clear policy signals and even accountability framework. So that is very important really to ensure inclusivity, ensure gender, and the social impact are really embedded in their national energy development plan and even investment incentives. Now, that's number one. Number two, development partners like World Bank and other multilateral financing banks can really help to translate those commitments into action by providing financing, by providing any de-risking tools, and some technical assistance really to explicitly link renewable energy investments to social outcomes, such as jobs and skills and even community benefits. Lastly, I think civil society, sometimes we forget civil society, but I think they bring voice, voice and accountability to ensure that the perspectives of women, youth, and local communities shape both policy but also the implementation. So, and private sector can scale up solutions, investing in a project that's not only deliver clean power, but also demonstrate tangible social and economic benefits. So I think if we can align those efforts around the shared data systems, measurable indicators, and the joint monitoring, I think even ASEAN can truly operationalize the just and inclusive energy transition to ensure that energy growth goes hand in hand with opportunity, with equity, and resilience for all. Let me stop here.
Okay, so 30 seconds. We've covered a lot of bases here, but I also want to go back and say the energy conversation can be really broad. So we're not just talking about renewable energy, we're also talking about transition of critical minerals. We're also talking about phasing out and transitioning towards renewable energy and all the issues. So, but then it also requires us to go really micro as to what the people, what women in this specific area need in this community. And unfortunately, but also fortunately, it provides us an opportunity for us to do all of that in order for us to transition into a completely different scenario. We don't, with increasing climate disasters and vulnerabilities, a lot of these communities are also dependent on a new system, a new way of looking at it, and to make sure that nobody's left behind. So yes, Kanzi's position is that a justice-centered, people-centered, focused energy transition is crucial in moving forward, so that we're not repeating past mistakes. Thank you.
Thank you. Naja took the words right out of my mouth. I think in terms of really looking at the just and inclusive energy transition, maybe I'll approach it from a bit more of a policy angle. I think mainstreaming the gender elements, the youth elements, the indigenous people, really just flipping the lens around, looking at where the conventional, redefining even, for example, I was mentioning earlier, redefining energy access, what that looks like, so that a wider range of economic activities can be supported in different settings, etc. So really mainstreaming some of these elements that have been overlooked for a very long time, incorporating that into policy setting at the national level, and also at the regional level. So, the PI 2026 implementation is going to have a very key and central role in ensuring that just an inclusive approach. And just to say that, I think it sounds very, it sounds appropriate to say that all the partners in the ecosystem stand very ready and very willing to support that. So I'm very happy to continue this level of partnership across, the financial partners, the governments, civil society, etc., and to further these objectives. Thank you.
I'm going to try and keep mine short, so less than 30 seconds. Echoing everybody, kind of cheating here. But really, yeah, like I think I'm ending this on a hopeful note, because I think I was talking to Nacha before this that, we've been in the space for so long and we're still talking about the same things, and we're talking about gender responsiveness. However, what I'm hearing here today is that we're actually ready to start asking serious questions, right? We're ready to challenge the system. And I think Southeast Asia has such potential to actually build that narrative for ourselves and what is contextual for us, what is culturally appropriate for us, and then move it along. So my sort of ask of everyone here is to keep questioning, keep challenging, and then let's shift it together.
Thank you so much, all the panelists. Please give a round of applause for all of our panelists. I think I just want to conclude by saying that as ASEAN going to advance their energy transition, we all need to remember that gender responsiveness is not an add-on, but a catalyst and a center of our energy transition. With that, I would like to conclude this session and give it back to Rhea.
Thank you so much. Another round of applause, please. To moderator and panelists, please stay in the front of the stage, and maybe we can take a picture together. To the team, please. Okay. All right, on the count of 1, 2, 3. Okay. All right, everyone, thank you so much. You might go back to your seat. And once again, thank you so much for the very insightful and also exciting conversation. And okay. With that, dear panelists, this is the end of our session. Thank you so much for coming, and I hope that after this we can continue the effort to promote the gender responsive policy. Thank you, and see you on the next opportunities.